So welcome, everyone. We're on our third week of looking at the hindrances. Um, the hindrances are what prevent us from uh, progressing on our spiritual journey. So um, they're the major thing that we work with when we're sitting in our meditation seats because the hindrances keep coming up and then so hopefully we're going to learn how to deal with them when they arise. So the first hindrance was desire that we did a few weeks ago, and then the next one was ill will or anger that we did last week. And tonight we're on what's usually translated as restlessness and remorse. Now the Pali term for this is udaka kukacha, something like that. So it's sort of like a rhyming word. So some people call this one in English to make it rhyme, worry and flurry. So if you like that better than restlessness and remorse. Um, so when our mind is restless or agitated or feeling remorse, it's not at peace. It's not a comfortable feeling. And I think there's sort of three categories that sort of lead to this mind state. One is that you just may have the habit energy of being an anxious kind of person. Um, or there may be a situation happening in your life that is is a cause for a lot of anxiety. Um, and of course, this can range, from very mild, just your mind wandering a little bit while you're meditating. So it's a very mild form of this restlessness to, like really severe panic attacks. So it can go from mild to gross. Um, So that's one sort of category of this. The next is remorse, and that's when you've said or done something that's maybe hurtful to yourself or to someone else, or maybe you've just been wasting your time and you're feeling remorse about that, having, just wasted your time. But it's feeling regret over something that you've said or done in the past. And sometimes it can just be your body. It just feels like your body is really restless. Now, I think in most cases, it's because your mind is agitated that then your body feels agitated. But there may be situations, say if you're an athlete or something and you're really used to moving your body, then trying to sit still in meditation may be difficult for you. It's a possibility. So the Buddha gives some similes for how it feels or what it's like to be in this agitated state. And the first simile is that there's wind ruffling the surface of water. So if you're trying to look into water, if it's very still and clear, then you can get a reflection of your face. But if the wind is rippling the surface of the water, then there's no way you can get a reflection. And in Buddhist terms, you're wanting to get a reflection of the three characteristics of reality. And the first one is dukkha or suffering, unsatisfactoriness. And Buddhism sort of sees this applying to everything. So some things, by their very nature, are suffering or unsatisfactory. You lose your job, a loved one dies, it rains on your picnic. So those things are just suffering right off the bat. But then all the beautiful things in life, they're wonderful, but then they're unsatisfactory because they end. They're impermanent. They don't last. So when we're wanting to have a reflection of reality, that's the first thing that we want to be able to see is this unsatisfactoriness or suffering. Um, the second is anicca, impermanence, changeability. Like we can't really rely on things because they end or they change, and maybe not to our wanting. So that's the second characteristic of reality that we want to have reflected back to us. And the third is anatta, um, translated as not self, and it just refers to the fact that we're a verb, not a noun. We're constantly changing. How we are at any given moment in time is due to causes and conditions. Um, and so realizing we're not a solid, unchanging entity, which is wonderful because if things aren't going well or we have qualities that are arising that we don't like, there's the chance to change them. We're not stuck with whatever it is. So that's can be a good thing. So that's one simile, that when we're agitated, it's like we can't see reality because of the wind rippling the surface of the water. The other simile is the Buddha said is when we're beset with agitation, it's like being a slave. If you're a slave, you can't just do or go wherever you want. Somebody else is giving the orders for you. But if you get to be freed from being a slave, then what a wonderful feeling, and now you have more control over your life. Okay, so the rest of the talk is going to be on what are some of the causes for this agitation to arise, and what are the antidotes that we can use. The first one is just to look at your life, like what is your life like outside of your meditation practice? Are you just rushing all the time, like doing this, doing that, doing this, doing that? And maybe they're fun, good things, but it's still just boom, 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 just, running around, just being so busy with so many things. So then if you sit down to meditate, maybe it's hard to expect that you're going to be able to be calm if you're living such a rushed life. So maybe one thing to look at is, is there some way that I can have a calmer life? I know for some of you it must be very difficult because I know you have full-time jobs and you have kids. So just by definition, you're going to be probably rushing around. But is there some way that you can bring some more calmness to your everyday life? And one of the suggestions is, can you use some sense restraints so that every time there's, a beautiful sight, sound, smell, taste, or touch, do you have to go after it? Do you have to include that in your life, or can you, let some things go? The other thing is to try and have some of those Kalyanamitas in your life, spiritual friends who've sort of learned how to have a calmer existence, and can you learn from their example? When you sit down to meditation, focus on a calming meditation, like breath meditation, and just really focus on the calming feeling of your breath coming in and out as a way to help. And some teachers suggest, like, often it's suggested to us just to notice our breath where we feel it entering our body, like not following it through our body. But if you're really agitated, maybe feeling the breath, if you feel the breath in your whole body, it's like your body expands with the in-breath and then contracts a bit. And so maybe that can be more calming or soothing if you're in an agitated state, to just be with the whole body experience of your breathing. And the other, when we've talked about the other hindrances, we've talked about feeling the hot coal, like when things aren't pleasant. If you feel a hot coal in your hand, you don't have to talk yourself out of dropping it. Like as soon as you're aware of that hot coal, you're going to drop it. So can you do that with your agitation? Can you really experience your agitation like a hot coal? So like you just don't, you want to drop it. You don't want to be with it. Okay, so that's one potential cause of us being agitated. Another is lack of contentment. So we're not always, well, we're certainly not always in control of what happens in our life. Um, and we can try and put in some causes and conditions to have it be the way we want, but it's not always so. And so, can we find some way to be content with the reality that we have? Um, so, in your meditation practice, um, can you just focus on the contentment of this breath? This calm, soothing breath that's coming in and out. And can whatever breath it be, can it be an okay breath? Can you just say, this is good enough? I'm okay with this particular breath. And just one teacher talks about just experiencing that breath coming in, just like you're just sinking back in a beautiful, easy chair. And just feeling that calmness and that soothingness of the breath. Another reason that our mind might wander and not be able to stay with our meditation object is maybe our meditation object is too subtle. I know for myself, a very short time after I sit down and start meditating, I lose the sensation of my breath. Like it just, because I've been meditating, I guess, for a long time, that when I watch my breath, very quickly it just gets so subtle that there's sort of a knowing. I know I'm breathing, so I can stay with the knowing of breathing in and breathing out, but there's no physical sensation. And so if you're finding, this is happening, that you can't really perceive your meditation object because it's too subtle, then do something to make it a bit coarser. And we've talked about this in these previous sessions on the hindrances. So one thing you can do is count, on each out breath, 1, and the next out breath, 2, and so on up to just 5 or 10. It's not suggested to go higher than that, and then start over again. So counting is one way. Getting up and walking, instead of doing sitting meditation, doing walking meditation, because that's a much coarser activity than sitting with your breath. So that can be very helpful. And then if you look back if you weren't here when I demonstrated, there was some hand movements that you could do that are, just quiet. They're not disturbing to the person sitting beside you, but because you're making these hand movements with your breath, then it can really help you stay focused on your meditation object. And so if you miss that, if you just look at the recordings of the last one or two, then you'll see the demonstration of the hand movements. Another reason for agitation is unbalanced effort. We have to have some effort to stay with our meditation object, but if we're really like grinding down and stressing about it, then it's not going to work. It's going to probably make us more agitated. And the Buddha gives a little story about Sona, who was he was a musician. I think he played the lute, and he said to Sona, like, Sona, what happens if you turn your, tune the strings too tight? Well, then the lute doesn't sound very good because everything's like too sharp. And he said, what happens if you tune it too, you don't tune it tight enough? Well, then everything's loose and it's all flat. And so you're just having to tune the strings just right to have the beautiful music. So it's the same thing with our meditation practice, we don't want to be sitting there and really grinding down and making ourselves uncomfortable. But we also don't want to be just falling asleep and not making any effort at all. So just finding that right balance where you can just be comfortably with your meditation object. And then the next, which is maybe the most common, is worry. There's some situation in your life that's happening or is going to happen, and you're freaking out about it. So first thing is to realize that worrying never solved any problems. There's certainly a place for, rational planning, and that's not a hindrance, So if there's something that's not going well, or some big stressful situation in your life, well, then certainly you want to sort of rationally think about, okay, what's my best way of approaching this? And make a plan, but keeping in the back of your mind that we're not in control of all of the causes and conditions. We can control some, but not all of them. So it doesn't matter, how well you plan. You're just not in control of all of the conditions, and so your plan may not work out. But that's the best we can do, is make a rational plan, and then do your best not to worry about it, to just see what happens. And then whatever happens, if your plan doesn't work out, well, then if it's appropriate, you make an alternate plan. But if you're finding yourself worrying, despite making your rational plan, but there's still that tendency to worry about it, like just going in circles round and round, which is creating, it's the second arrow, suffering again, right? So the first arrow is this worrisome situation that's happening in your life. And then the second arrow is you worrying about it. So you're just piling on the agitation. So what's suggested in this case is to do a Dhamma reflection, which is different than rational planning. The Dhamma reflection is, as I said, it's realizing you're not in control of all of the conditions, and that this isn't helpful, and probably this worrying that's is coming up as sort of a habit energy. You don't have to own it as me. I'm a worrier. Like, it's just, worrying has come up, because of past causes and conditions. But, I didn't ask for it. It's not mine. It's not me. To just talk to yourself in this way to see if you can let go of this. If not, then what I found working with people, in my psychiatry practice, I work with a lot of people with some pretty severe, anxiety situations. And what was so helpful is I'd just take them outside and then I'd have them run. But I do the Thich Nhat Hanh sort of walking meditation style. So I ask them to be aware of every time their feet hit the ground, and then to count how many foot touches they had on their in-breath. So they had to be not only aware of their feet touching the ground, but also aware of if they were breathing in or breathing out. So I had them count how many footfalls for an in-breath, and then count how many footfalls for an out-breath. Now, none of this matters. I mean, it doesn't matter how many footfalls there were. What you're doing is you're filling your brain with little tasks to do, that there's no room for this worrying to come in. And then I would just have them go as fast as they needed to go to counteract that worrying in their mind. So the greater the agitation, then the faster maybe they had to run to counteract it. And it only took a few minutes, because then you exhaust yourself too. So then they go from running to fast walking to slow walking, and then we'd be able to come back in, and the agitation would be settled, and then we'd be able to, work on whatever they come to work on. But very, very effective. So consider that if you're really agitated. Now, I should tell you that a lot of senior meditation teachers say they say the opposite of what I just said to you. They're saying if you're feeling agitated, sit still, don't move. But I think you really have to decide, like, how severe is this agitation? And I think if you're not practiced in meditation, that's a tall order, asking somebody to do that. So so I think if it's quite severe, I really recommend the running meditation. And if you can't go outside, you could do it up and down, run up and down stairs if you have stairs or whatever. But then maybe after you've done this several times, then you could try it out just sitting with it and see how it goes. And there's definitely research supporting this, research on anxiety disorders, especially those. I can't remember if this applied to generalized anxiety, but for, if there's a specific trigger and then you get a panic attack or something that comes up, that if you sit with it, then eventually the adrenaline that got stimulated runs out. Your supply of adrenaline runs out. And so then it's a really good experience, because then you realize that it's impermanent. It doesn't last forever. It's going to end. And so the next time you get triggered into this, you can remember that and know, okay, it's going to end after a certain time. So you can play with that. Other suggestions are, when you're agitated, can you be around a calm person, one of your Kalyanamittas? So can their calmness sort of help you stay calm? And I remember Thich Nhat Hanh talking about the boat people, and when so many people for Vietnam were trying to escape in these little tiny rowboats, and, in serious waves and very dangerous. But if there was a meditator in the boat who was very calm, it really helped everybody else in the boat to calm down. And if there's not a Kalyana around who's calm, then they're suggesting you put on a Dhamma talk, that, where somebody's talking and giving a talk in a calm and measured way, and that the energy of their voice can maybe soothe you, calm you down. And then the last one is remorse. So you've said or done something that's maybe been hurtful to yourself or to others, or maybe you've just wasted your time and you're feeling remorseful about how you've wasted your time. So again, just this cycling it over and over in your body, feeling bad, that doesn't help anything. Like in Buddhism, is just totally against guilt. It's just not seen as a helpful emotion. So certainly we can learn, if we've done something that hasn't been skillful, then we can maybe learn from that and make a determination not to repeat that particular, whatever it was that we said or did, might make a determination. But there's really no point in continually beating yourself up. And actually, the research shows if you do that, you're less likely to have improved behavior. Quite interesting. Yeah, so don't beat yourself up. If you've done something, just think, what can I learn from this? And then just do your best to let it go. And if you can do an apology, like if it's appropriate to apologize or do some kind of rectifying behavior, great. But if not, you can just sort of dilute the karma of that act by just practicing generosity, kindness, metta, sending metta to yourself and to others. Just dilute. The Buddha says, like if you have a glass of water and you have salt in it, it's pretty darn salty. But if you throw a teaspoon of salt in a clear pond or something, like you're not going to be able to taste it at all. So that's referring to diluting, our if we have some unskillful karma, like some unskillful actions that we've done. If most of our other actions can be skillful, like kind, generous, caring, helpful ones, then it's just like that little bit of salt in a pond instead of salt in a glass of water. Um, okay, so I think that's all I had to say. So we've got time for, let me just do this.